On behalf of the New York Library Association Civil Service Task Force, I'm proud to present Civil Service 101. If you're interested in working at a public library in New York State, it's important to know about civil service. Every position, from a part-time page to a full-time librarian or even a library director, is within the classified service. Association libraries are not considered public employers, therefore civil service does not apply, even if an association library is part of a public library system. In the 1800s, the New York State Constitution was amended to provide for a system of civil service. The goal was to reduce political and patronage hiring. Language was added to provide a system where positions are awarded based on an individual's merit and fitness as determined based on examination. Accordingly, the majority of positions are subject to competitive examination. Civil service law establishes retention rights based on an individual's seniority in the civil service system and prioritizes individuals who are already permanent in the civil service system for the purposes of promotion. Civil service law provides for a municipal civil service agency to establish its own rules and regulations for administering civil service in its municipal entities. These rules have the force and effect of law. Therefore, it's important to be aware of the rules for the municipality within which you are applying. Oftentimes, people think that if they didn't take an exam, they are not part of the civil service system. That is not accurate. There are 4 classes within classified service: the competitive class, the non-competitive class, the labor class, and the exempt class. Only one of these classes requires examination, the competitive class. The vast majority of positions within civil service are competitive. Competitive examination is really the core of civil service. When the law was enacted, the intent was to establish merit and fitness through examination. To secure a permanent competitive class position, candidates must meet minimum qualifications for the position, compete in an examination for the position, obtain a passing score and be reachable on eligible list, which I will discuss later on what reachable means, and successfully complete a probationary period. If you review a job specification for a civil service position, it should indicate if it is competitive, non-competitive, labor, or exempt class. The other classes include non-competitive. In order to hold a non-competitive position, you must meet the minimum qualifications. However, you do not need to take an exam. For a labor class position, little to no minimum qualifications are established, and you do not need to take an exam. In an exempt position, there are no minimum qualifications, and the individual simply serves at the pleasure of the appointing authority. A civil service agency may offer 2 types of exams for the same title. The first is open competitive. This type of exam is open to the public. Anyone who meets the minimum qualifications at the time of application may apply. The second is promotional. This type of exam is only open to individuals in a lower level title, within the direct line of promotion within the hiring authority. As mentioned earlier, civil service gives preference to individuals who are already in civil service. The idea is to promote individuals who have served in the lower level title within civil service. So if a promotional exam and an open competitive exam exist for the same title, and valid lists resulting from promotional examination will be used before a list resulting from an open competitive examination. Both open competitive and promotional exams are held in more than one format. Not all civil service exams require an individual to bring a pen and paper to a location on a set date and to take an exam. That is the more traditional method known as a written exam. A training and experience exam is held differently. Once an individual applies for an exam, if they meet the minimum qualifications, they are sent a questionnaire to complete. Their score is based on their training and experience as submitted on the questionnaire. I will go through the typical process, generally speaking, for filling a competitive class position. The pertinent points of civil service law should apply. The details of the process may vary among libraries or municipalities, but the legal points should be consistent. When a vacancy arises in a competitive class position, the appointing authority requests a certified eligible list from the municipal civil service agency. If a promotional list exists, the promotional list will be sent. If not, open competitive lists will be sent. A list will contain names of those individuals who took exam and their scores. The appointing authority will then canvass the list to see who is willing to accept appointment. This is a sample of a canvass letter. It is only a sample, and the canvass process may vary across municipalities. The important things to note are, number 1, a return by date. If you do not return it in a timely manner, you will not be considered for a position, and you could be removed from the list for failing to respond. Number 2, look at the location. If you are not interested in working at that location, you may be able to decline for the location but remain on the list for that title. Number 3, if the canvass asks you to submit a cover letter and resume, do it. It will not be sufficient just to reply with the canvass letter. Number 4, if you are declining, carefully review the reasons for declining. Each may have a different impact on your placement on future lists. A certified eligible list will contain the names of those who passed the exam and have not previously declined appointment from that list. Since more than one person can get the same score, tie scores are ranked on the list based on an impartial factor selected by the Civil Service Agency. Common examples are alphabetically by last name or the last 4 digits of a person's Social Security number. Do not panic if you got 100 but are ranked 5th because your last name starts with Z. You are just as eligible for appointment as a person with 100 that has a last name starting with A. We will go deeper into the rule of 3 later. A list is established after an exam is scored for a minimum of 1 year and a maximum of 4 years. A municipal entity is not required to use a list that contains less than 3 names of people willing to accept appointment. So at any point in time, from the time the exam is scored until 4 years is up, the list contains less than 3 names, it is not mandatory. The moment you've all been waiting for, the rule of 3. What does it mean? Please tell me. Civil service law requires the employer to select someone from the top 3 scores, someone who is reachable. But what does that mean? How do I know if I'm in the top 3 scores? Here is what you do to determine who is reachable. Count down 3 names from the top of the list. Anyone above the 3rd person, so that would be the 1st or 2nd person on the list, or anyone tied in the score with the 3rd person, is reachable and can be appointed. May anyone in the top 3 scores be appointed? No, that's a common mistake. Only people above or tied in the score with the 3rd person on the list are reachable and can be appointed. It is not necessarily the top 3 scores. Let's go over some examples. And please keep in mind that who is reachable may change after a certified list is canvassed because some people on the list may decline. Example number 1. Julia has 100, Sal has a 95, and Linda has a 90, and Horace has an 85. If Julia, Sal, and Linda accept, then only they can be considered. If one of those 3 decline, let's say Sal declines, then Horace and anyone with a tie score of Horace, so Kafir and Joe, are now reachable. Example number 2. Paula, Karen, and Jim all have a 90. They are all reachable. Taylor is not with a score of 85. But if Taylor had a 90, she would be reachable. Also, if Karen declined, then Taylor, Lewis, and Pat now become reachable with Paula and Jim. Example number 3. Pedro and Will have a score of 90. Lori, Marie, and Dan and Jill have an 85. All 5 are reachable. If Pedro and Will decline, Lori, Marie, Dan, and Jill are reachable. But if Lori, Marie, Dan, and Jill decline, then Tammy is reachable. There are various types of appointment. A permanent appointment is one where a reachable candidate is selected from a list to fill a permanent vacancy. When a person is appointed permanently, they must serve a probationary period. Assuming they pass probation, they become permanent. What happens if the permanent position you are taking is vacant because the person who held it before you has taken a leave of absence from the position? An example might be a person who left to serve in another position but has rights to go back to it for a variety of reasons. If that is the case, your position is called contingent permanent. That means you are permanent, but your staying in your position is still contingent on the previous person who held it. Permanency is important and will be discussed more later on. Temporary appointments are just that, temporary. By taking a temporary appointment, you will not achieve permanency under civil service. You will also not get credit for the temporary experience to use toward a promotional exam. But temporary appointments are a good way to get your foot in the door. Briefly, if a temporary appointment will last under 3 months, the municipal entity does not need to pick somebody from an eligible list. If it will last 3 to 6 months, the person must be on the list but does not need to be in the top 3. If the temporary appointment is 6 months or more, then the person must be on the list and reachable. Provisional appointments. As discussed previously, if a list is more than 4 years old or contains less than 3 names willing to accept appointment, the municipal entity does not need to use an eligible list. It can appoint provisionally. The person must meet the minimum qualifications at the time of appointment. The civil service agency will require they demonstrate this before appointment. The person must then be eligible to take the next exam. If the person meets the minimum qualifications, exam eligibility should not be a question. But a word of caution, the person reviewing qualifications at the time of provisional appointment may not be the same person who reviews qualifications for the exam. It is important to be clear and provide as much information as possible when applying. Once the exam is scored, the person in the provisional appointment must be reachable in order to maintain their appointment. If they are, they will be moved from provisional to permanent. There is a requirement of probation period under a permanent appointment. Seniority is defined and used in civil service law for the purposes of retention in the event of layoff. When the term seniority is used under civil service law, it is referring to the date of first permanent appointment in classified service. Seniority is calculated based upon continuous service. Intervening periods of employment on a provisional or temporary basis do not interrupt the continuity of service. Continuity is interrupted by a break in service of more than 1 year. It is very important to realize that employees may have different seniority date under their union contract, and seniority is used for a different purpose outside of civil service. Similarly, transfer may have a different meaning under civil service law than it does a union contract. Under civil service, it means to change without further examination from a permanent employee from one appointing authority to another in the same or similar position. Moves within an appointing authority or departments are called reassignments under civil service law, not transfers. I hope you found this presentation informative. Please remember, this information is for guidance only. If you have specific questions, it's best practice to contact your local civil service agency or the employer you seek employment with. If you are interested in employment in the public sector, you should frequently check your state and local municipal websites for exam announcements. Some municipalities allow you to sign up for email alerts of all exam announcements. Good luck.